Today we'll be reading H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu for beginner readers, written by R.J. Ivankovic. Part 1. The Horror in Clay. The most merciful thing in the world, I believe, is humanity's failure to fully conceive of the cosmical horrors we've yet to reveal, and which up until now I have tried to conceal. Back in late 26, when my great-uncle died, I uncovered the research he wanted to hide. Over time, he'd uncovered much more than he should. He'd have kept it all secret, if only he could. But Professor George Angell has met with his fate, and exactly what killed him has caused some debate. The physicians have claimed there's no reason to doubt that his lengthy walk home caused his heart to give out. The more sinister truth? I have heard people say he was shoved by a sailor who stood in his way. And my poor Uncle George, he was really too old to survive such a bump on a hill in the cold. Shortly after his death on that hill by the sea, the professor's belongings were given to me. I was sorting through all of his research one day when I found a monstrosity made out of clay. It was carved by a sculptor named Wilcox one night, when more sensitive folk endured horrible sights. The young sculptor was puzzled by what he had made, by the script and the creature his carving displayed. So he sought out an expert who'd know what they meant, who'd explain his mad visions and where his mind went. It was fortune that brought him to Angell's front door. You see, Angell had seen such a creature before. The professor urged Wilcox to try and recall all the things he had dreamed of, no matter how small. When the sculptor then coughed up the sounds he had heard, it confirmed something quite supernatural occurred. Cthulhu Fatagan. The professor requested a journal be kept, that the sculptor could update each night that he slept. And the dreamer recorded the things he had seen for the whole month of March with this nightly routine. But on April the 2nd, his diary stopped, when into unconsciousness Wilcox had dropped. I believed it was probably some kind of hoax that my uncle fell victim to Wilcox's jokes. For a time I was willing to let it all pass, until later I read of Inspector Legrasse. Part 2. The Tale of Inspector Legrasse. When Legrasse met with experts who liked to explore, he had shown them a thing they had not seen before. He was looking for answers, but got none at all, until Webb raised his hand at the back of the hall. He had seen something like it a long time ago. It was worshipped in Greenland by strange Eskimo.
Naglui, Oglonafa, Cthulhu, Rilya, Wagnago, Vdachen.
He described how they danced and repeated their cries, which Legrasse recognized to the expert's surprise. He went on to reveal where his knowledge was gained. He'd encountered a cult, the inspector explained. They had told him the meaning of the words they'd been screaming. In his house at Erlier, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. In a New Orleans swamp, less than 1 year before, he had broken that cult in the name of the law. When some people who lived near that swamp disappeared, the police had been called, and the worst had been feared. There were rumors of crimes being kept out of sight in the heart of the swamp, in the midst of the night. So Legrasse had arranged for a squad of brave men to accompany him to the maniac's den. The policemen took care to avoid certain trails, as the locals had told them some terrible tales. They were warned of a lake and its polypus thing, to which cultists at midnight would crazily sing. When Legrasse and his men had uncovered the place, they discovered the worst of the whole human race. The policemen had paused to recover their breath. All the kidnapping victims had been put to death. With the cultists locked up by the end of the day, the police had to know why they'd acted that way. Then a cultist named Castro had spoken with glee when describing a city lost under the sea. He believed that great old ones who lie underground will remain there until that lost city is found. Great Cthulhu once led them across outer space when they flew here to Earth from some faraway place. They have slept for millennia, Castro had said, but their dreaming confirms that they're really not dead. When that city, named Legrasse, comes up from the deep, then Cthulhu will stir and give up his great sleep. You'll find mention of this if you dare take a look inside Abdul al-Hazred's mysterious book. I will quote here verbatim for those who don't know what that mad Arab wrote such a long time ago. There is nothing that's dead which can eternal lie, because give it strange eons, and death may yet die. So Cthulhu's cults study the skies every night, knowing Legrasse will rise when the stars are just right. All the experts and Angel had taken an oath not to speak of that cult, nor encourage its growth. With the mad implications of what they had heard, they would research in secret and not say a word. It was hard to believe all the things that I'd read. I still doubted a lot of what Wilcox had said. I had thought that perhaps the young sculptor had heard of that dark southern swamp and the crime that occurred. For my own peace of mind, I just had to be sure that it wasn't a prank and it was something more. When I'd spoken to Wilcox, he'd made it quite clear that the Call of Cthulhu was something to fear. Then I went to see Castro, but Castro was dead. So I stopped in to see the inspector instead. When I spoke to Legrasse, I was lucky to find that he still had the cult in the back of his mind. I started to think it would make my career if I published this stuff for the whole world to hear. I believed I could research and then write a book, but with no further leads, there was nowhere to look. So I packed up my notes and I put them aside. It was only much later a clue was supplied. Part 3. The Madness from the Sea. I was studying rocks from all over the world when a sheet of old newsprint from Sydney unfurled. On that faded old page, a forgotten report told the tale of a schooner whose trip was cut short. Of 11 crew members, 10 failed to return, and the loss of the Emma had caused some concern. After meeting a yacht which had ordered them back, it appears that the Emma fell under attack. When the Emma was sunk, there was nothing to do but to seize the Alert and abandon her crew. 2 weeks later in Sydney, a sailor arrived, but no other crewman from the Emma survived. The report said Johansen returned from the sea with an idol in hand, quite mysteriously. On the fate of his crew, he'd refused to say more than they'd died on an island they'd stopped to explore. The events had occurred in the very same week that young Wilcox's nightmares had been at their peak. So I tracked down Johansen to hear what he'd say, through New Zealand and Sydney and lastly Norway. When Mrs. Johansen had come to his door, she explained that he'd died just a few months before. He had never revealed what had happened at sea, so she took out his logbook and gave it to me. He had written in English to help spare his wife from the terrible knowledge which ruined his life. In that book he described the strange place he had seen, and I knew it was Erlie, the sailor had been. When the crew went ashore, they discovered a stair, so they climbed to the top just to see what was there. Then Johansen described how a door opened wide, and they heard something stir in the darkness inside. He described how they froze and how nobody spoke. So intense was their fear when Cthulhu awoke. When Johansen and Britain returned to the sea, they had jumped in their boat in an effort to flee. As Johansen prepared to escape in the yacht, he discovered the boiler was not very hot. When the sailors then learned that Cthulhu could swim, poor old Britain went mad and the future looked grim. The Alert started moving, but not very fast, and the creature drew closer each moment that passed. There was nothing to do but to steer with the wheel till Cthulhu's great head was lined up with the keel. When the yacht pierced Cthulhu between his great eyes, the Alert had survived, to Johansen's surprise. At the end of the logbook, I fearfully read that the monster was sighted repairing his head. By the time they were rescued, poor Britain had died, and Johansen was sitting with eyes open wide. Then the rescue ship Vigilant sailed past the spot where the city once was, but by then it was not. I assumed that Cthulhu resumed his great sleep at the heart of his city, way down in the deep. I discovered the sender of Wilcox's dreams, and I'm certain there's more to the cult than it seems. But the knowledge is more than just one man can take, and in knowing I fear that my mind will soon break. Now I've told you these things so that you'll understand why I'm sealing them up, just as Angel had planned. Just remember the cultists are out there somewhere, keeping track of the secrets they don't want to share. Found among the papers of the late Francis Wayland Thurston of Boston. Thank you for listening to H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu for beginner readers, adapted by R.J. Ivankovic. And I want to give a special shout out to my lovely wife Diana, who helps support me in all of my ventures. Thank Cthulhu you came into my life.